The first sliver of dawn, a brutal orange tearing through the pre-dawn inky blackness, was not a gentle awakening in Sparta. It was a violent, unrelenting affirmation of purpose. For Theron, as for every Spartan, the day didn't begin with a sigh or a stretch, but with a duty etched into his very bones, hammered into him from the unforgiving fires of the Agoge. What did it truly mean to live, breathe, and fight as a Spartan? This wasn't a story of myths whispered by hearths, but of the relentless reality that forged the most feared warriors of the ancient world. Theron jolted awake, not to the gentle crow of a rooster, but to the guttural shout of his Ephors. A chilling breeze, still carrying the night's dampness from the Eurotas River, snaked its way through the open barracks. He could feel it on his bare chest, a faint goosebump-raising chill that was quickly overwritten by the internal fire of anticipation. Every muscle in his body, honed by years of relentless training, was tense, coiled. There was no softness in this life, no easing into the day, only the hard ground beneath his thin mat and the harder truth of his calling. He moved with the practiced economy of a man whose every action was a deliberate extension of his will. No wasted movement, no lingering thoughts. His hand, calloused and rough as ancient bark, reached for the coarse woolen tunic. It was a familiar embrace, the simple fabric, a second skin. Around him, the barracks stirred, a symphony of grunts, the rustle of wool, and the soft rhythmic thud of bare feet hitting packed earth. Each man a mirror of the other, each face grim, expectant. They were homoioi, the equals, bound by an unbreakable creed. The pre-dawn light, still hesitant, painted the barracks in shades of gray. The air hung heavy with the scent of bodies, damp earth, and the faint, metallic tang of iron from their weapons, a constant reminder of their purpose. Theron glanced at his aspis, his shield, leaning against the wall, its bronze boss gleaming faintly, a silent sentinel. It was more than just protection, it was his home, his identity. To return without it was unthinkable, to return on it the highest honor. The Ephors' sharp voice cut through the growing hum of activity, a whip-crack of authority. Out! The sun waits for no man. And they moved. A silent, disciplined tide of men pouring out of the barracks into the crisp, unforgiving Spartan morning, ready to face whatever ordeal the day demanded. For in Sparta, every sunrise was an affirmation, a brutal reaffirmation of purpose. And for Theron, like every other Spartan, the day had begun not with a choice, but with a duty etched into his very bones, forged in the fires of the Agoge. The sun, now a brazen smear of orange above the jagged peaks of Mount Taygetus, offered little warmth as Theron and his Syssitia, his mess group, his brothers, began their morning run. The ground beneath his bare feet was a mix of hard-packed earth and scattered sharp pebbles, each step a testament to enduring discomfort. The air was thin, biting, and each breath was a frosty plume in the cool dawn. But the cold was not an enemy. It was another instructor teaching resilience. They moved as one, a disciplined wave of muscle and sinew, their heavy breathing the only sound breaking the morning stillness, a rhythmic symphony of effort. Theron felt the burn in his calves, the ache in his lungs, but he welcomed it. This was the language of the Agoge, spoken daily since he was 7, shaping him, forging him. Every sprint, every leap, every grueling march was designed to strip away weakness, to distill essence, the Spartan warrior. The training grounds were already alive with the energy of other homoioi. Young men, still bearing the faint marks of boyhood, grappled in the dust, their grunts echoing the impact of bodies. Older, seasoned warriors, their faces etched with the sun and the wear of countless campaigns, moved with a silent, lethal grace, their spears whistling through the air. Theron found his place in a line, picking up a heavy practice spear. His body knew the drill, the fluidity of the movements, thrust, parry, lunge. Sweat, cold at first, soon beaded on his brow, mingling with the dust that coated his skin. His muscles stretched and contracted, a primal dance of combat. He focused, his eyes unwavering on the imagined enemy, his movements precise, economical. There was no room for hesitation, no space for error. A Spartan's life and the life of his brothers depended on perfection. He sparred with Lycon, his lifelong friend and comrade from the same Syssitia. Lycon was a bear of a man, solid and unyielding, but quick as a viper when roused. Their practice spears clanged, a sharp metallic ring that punctuated their grunts of effort. Theron feinted left, parried a vicious thrust to his side, and countered with a low sweep. Lycon, anticipating, sidestepped, his eyes narrowed in concentration. Their movements were a desperate, brutal dance, honed by years of shared struggle. There was no animosity, only the fierce, respectful rivalry of brothers. "Faster, Theron," Lycon grunted, sweat plastering his dark hair to his temples. "The Persian won't wait for you to catch your breath." Beyond the physical drills, the Agoge was a constant psychological conditioning. The Ephors, stern and unforgiving, were everywhere, their eyes like hawks, missing nothing. There was no escape from their scrutiny, no moment for weakness. Even when they were not physically present, their presence lingered, a shadow in every corner of a Spartan's life. This was the subtle, pervasive influence of the Crypteia, the shadowy enforcers of Spartan discipline. They were the silent watchers, testing resolve, ensuring unwavering loyalty to the state. The thought of them, a silent judgment, was enough to keep a man true even in his deepest thoughts. Theron remembered the stories of the Crypteia from his youth. Tales of young Spartans sent out into the darkness, armed with only a dagger, to prove their cunning and endurance, to learn to survive by their wits. It was a harsh pruning designed to weed out the weak, to strengthen the strong. It was a system that emphasized self-reliance, obedience, and an unshakable sense of duty. The Agoge, as he knew, wasn't merely about physical prowess. It was about creating the homoioi, the equals. From the moment they were taken from their mothers at the age of 7, stripped of individual identity, they were plunged into a system designed to forge them into a single, cohesive unit. They learned unwavering loyalty to the state, obedience to their superiors, and an absolute contempt for luxury and fear. They were taught to speak concisely, with the laconic wit that defined a Spartan, to conserve words as they conserved breath in battle. They were taught to endure hunger, thirst, pain, and cold without complaint. Their beds were reed mats, their clothes meager, their food scarce. This relentless austerity wasn't punishment, it was preparation. Preparation for a life where comfort was a weakness and survival was the only true measure of a man. Every Spartan male, regardless of birth, went through this crucible. From the future kings to the lowliest citizen, all were shaped by the same iron hammer. As the sun climbed higher, casting longer shadows across the training grounds, Theron felt an almost perverse satisfaction. His muscles ached, his chest heaved, but his mind was clear, focused. This was his purpose, his life. And in the shared struggle with his brothers, there was a strange, undeniable comfort. The Agoge had stripped them bare, but it had also bound them together, creating a brotherhood stronger than blood, forged in the relentless echo of morning training. The aroma, if one could call it that, reached Theron long before he entered the Syssitia hall. It was the familiar, pungent scent of the Spartan black broth, a stew of boiled pork, blood, and vinegar. To an outsider, it might have been an affront to the senses. To Theron, it was the smell of sustenance, of shared hardship, and of home. The hall was a cavernous, unadorned room, its stone walls still cool from the morning air. Long wooden tables, scarred and worn from countless meals, stretched across the space. Men from his Syssitia were already taking their places, their faces grimed with sweat and dust from the morning's exertions, but a subtle relaxation entering their posture. This was a brief, cherished respite, not for luxury, but for communion. Theron dipped his wooden cup into the communal pot, a meager ladleful of the dark, steaming liquid. He took his seat beside Lycon, the familiar weight of his aspis leaning against his leg. There was no clatter of fancy pottery, no gleam of polished utensils. Just the quiet scraping of wooden spoons against bowls, the low murmur of voices, and the occasional, almost imperceptible sigh of contentment. "The Ephor nearly had Lysander for his clumsy parry this morning," Lycon muttered, his voice low as he spooned a chunk of gristle from his broth. Theron grunted in agreement. "He wears his fatigue like a cloak." needs more sleep or less of that foul barley wine he favors. They shared a fleeting, knowing glance. Lysander was a good man, steady in a fight, but prone to lapses in concentration when his private demons gnawed at him. The Syssitia was more than just a meal. It was the beating heart of Spartan society. Here, away from the rigid hierarchy of the training ground, the barriers between men softened, if only slightly. The kings themselves partook of the same fare, sat at the same tables, a powerful symbol of their shared identity as homoioi. There was no room for individual wealth to create division, no space for opulence to breed resentment. Every man contributed his share of barley, wine, and cheese, and the helots, those whom the Spartans had conquered, tilled the fields and provided the raw sustenance that fueled the Spartan war machine. Their unseen labor was the foundation upon which Spartan society rested, a constant, sobering reminder of the delicate balance of power. Conversation was typically laconic, as was the Spartan way. No lengthy discourses, no idle chatter. Just sharp, witty observations, military anecdotes, or practical discussions about the day's training. Sometimes, an older warrior, his beard streaked with gray, would share a tale from a previous campaign, the lessons implicitly woven into the narrative, courage in the face of overwhelming odds, the importance of precise formations, the brutality of real combat. Theron listened, absorbing the lessons, storing them away. He remembered a story from his own youth, told by an elder during a Syssitia. It was about a Spartan who had been captured in battle. When asked why he didn't fight to the death, he reputedly replied, "To save myself for another day, to die gloriously when it truly matters." It was a hard lesson, a pragmatic one, that resonated deeply within him. Yet, amidst the austerity, there were moments of grim humor, flashes of camaraderie that solidified the bonds between them. A shared laugh at a clumsy recruit, a muttered curse at the perpetual blandness of the broth, a quick, reassuring clap on the shoulder. These were the subtle threads that wove the fabric of their brotherhood. They were united not only by the Agoge's harsh lessons, but by the daily ritual of shared meals, shared burdens, and shared purpose. As the meal concluded, as sparse as it was, Theron felt his strength returning, his energy replenished. The Syssitia wasn't just about feeding the body, it was about feeding the soul of the collective. It reinforced the unwavering belief that no man stood alone, that their strength lay in their unity, in their loyalty to one another and to Sparta. They were brothers, bound by the black broth and the unwritten laws of their chosen way of life. The sun climbed higher, casting long, sharp shadows across the Spartan plain. Theron found himself not on the training grounds, but at the western gate of the city, standing sentinel. His bronze helmet, polished to a dull sheen, felt heavy on his head, and the weight of his aspes, his shield, rested comfortably on his arm. This was another facet of Spartan life, the quiet yet vital duty of maintaining order and securing the borders of their homeland. The city itself was unadorned, devoid of the grand temples or ornate public buildings that adorned other Greek city-states. Spartan architecture was functional, built for practicality and strength, reflecting the austere nature of its people. There were no frivolous flourishes, no unnecessary embellishments. Every stone, every wall, spoke a purpose. From his vantage point, Theron could see the fertile Eurotas Valley stretching out, its fields green with crops. He could just make out the figures of helots working in the distance, their movements slow and unhurried. They were the economic backbone of Sparta, the laborers who provided the food and resources that allowed the Spartan citizens to dedicate themselves solely to military training. Yet their presence was a constant reminder of the delicate social balance, the ever-present threat of revolt that simmered beneath the surface. It was why vigilance was not merely a military virtue, but a societal necessity. His watch was calm, punctuated only by the occasional distant bleating of sheep or the call of a bird overhead. Yet Theron remained alert, his senses honed. A Spartan's life was not just endless training and battle. It was also about maintaining the meticulously ordered society, upholding the laws, and ensuring the smooth functioning of the state. He recalled the lessons from his youth about the dual monarchy, the two kings who ruled, balancing power. Stories of the Gerousia, the Council of Elders, men over 60 who debated laws and judged serious cases, and the Ephors, the 5 magistrates who truly held the reins of power, overseeing everything from education to foreign policy. Each element a cog in the mighty, relentless machine that was Sparta. Later in the day, Theron attended a civic gathering, not a raucous democratic assembly like in Athens, but a more subdued affair of the Apella, the assembly of all Spartan male citizens over the age of 30. Here, proposals were put forth and decisions made, not through eloquent speeches and passionate debate, but through acclamation, a simple shout of approval or disapproval. The louder the shout, the stronger the affirmation. It was a swift, efficient, and distinctly Spartan way of reaching consensus, valuing unity over individual rhetorical flourish. Theron stood amongst his peers, his voice joining the chorus when a new measure concerning troop deployments was put to a vote. It was a quiet affirmation of his participation, his stake in the collective destiny of Sparta. The afternoon also brought the solemn duty of instructing younger recruits. Theron demonstrated proper spear handling, correcting a trembling hand, patiently repeating the footwork for a feint. He saw glimpses of his younger self in their eager, yet sometimes clumsy movements. He remembered the harsh words of his own instructors, the sting of a misplaced blow, the burning shame of failure. But he also remembered the quiet satisfaction of mastering a new skill, the pride in becoming part of something greater than himself. It was a cycle, unending, ensuring the continuity of Spartan power. As dusk began to paint the sky in hues of purple and gold, Theron walked back towards his barracks. He passed women walking through the streets, their heads uncovered, their movements confident. Spartan women, unlike those in many other Greek city-states, enjoyed a remarkable degree of freedom and respect. They owned property, managed estates, and, like the men, engaged in rigorous physical training. Plutarch's account spoke of their strength, both physical and moral, their dedication to producing strong, healthy children for Sparta. Theron often thought of his own mother, a formidable woman who had instilled in him the unshakable belief that a Spartan's greatest honor was to serve the state. The day was a tapestry of obligations, woven with threads of vigilance, civic participation, and the constant burden of maintaining a society built on a fragile foundation. Every breath, every action, every thought was tethered to Sparta. It was a life of unending discipline, but it was also a life of profound purpose. And in that purpose, Theron found a strange, austere pride. The demands of the day began to recede as evening draped its cloak over Sparta. Theron found himself in a quiet corner of the barracks, the fading light filtering through a narrow opening, illuminating motes of dust dancing in the air. He was performing the ritualistic cleaning of his bronze shield, applying a fine oil to its surface, rubbing away the dust and grime of the day. The smooth, cool metal felt familiar beneath his fingers, a silent companion, a repository of countless hours of training and the promise of future battles. In these rare moments of quietude, Theron's mind, usually a fortress of focus, allowed itself to wander, not aimlessly, but with a deliberate Spartan precision. Spartans were not mindless brutes, though the world often portrayed them as such. They valued strategic thinking, the art of laconic wit, and above all, stoicism, the mastery of emotion, the unwavering resolve in the face of pain or pleasure. He thought of the lessons from the elders, not just of battle tactics, but of the philosophy that underpinned their very existence. Ethos, reverence, respect for tradition, for the gods, for the laws. Sophrosyne, moderation, self-control, avoiding excess in all things. These were not abstract concepts, they were the very bedrock of their lives. He recalled a story told to him as a boy of a Spartan mother handing her son his shield as he left for battle, saying only, "Etan, I epitas," with this or upon this. It was a stark, brutal choice, victory or death. And in that brevity, in that powerful simplicity, lay the essence of Spartan philosophy. It was a philosophy of self-sacrifice, of absolute dedication to the collective, where the individual existed only to serve the state. Theron ran a finger over a small dent on the rim of his shield, a memory surfacing from an intense training exercise months ago. He had misjudged a thrust, had been too eager, and the opposing spear had clipped his shield instead of drawing blood. A minor error, but in battle, it could mean life or death. He had chastised himself then, not for the physical pain, but for the lapse in concentration, the fleeting moment of weakness. He thought of his comrades, of Lycon's unyielding strength, of Lysander's occasional fatigue. They were all bound by the same code, yet each carried his own burdens, his own silent struggles. And in this shared understanding, there was a profound sense of brotherhood. They did not speak of their fears, for fear was a weakness. But in the quiet glances, in the shared burdens of the march, in the disciplined movements of the phalanx, there was an unshakable trust, a silent affirmation of their unbreakable bond. What did it mean to be truly disciplined? It wasn't just about following orders, Theron mused. It was about forging one's will into an instrument of unwavering purpose. It was about mastering the primal urges, the fleeting doubts, the whispers of comfort. It was about choosing the harder path always for the greater good of Sparta. What sacrifices were they willing to make for their community, for their beliefs? Everything. Their lives, their individual desires, their very breaths. He remembered a saying, "Other Greeks fight for victory, we fight for honor." It was a subtle distinction, but a profound one. Victory was fleeting, but honor, true honor, was eternal. It was the legacy they sought, the only immortality they truly desired. Theron gazed at his reflection in the polished bronze, his features indistinct, a shadowy outline. It was not a physical likeness he sought in the reflection, but a glimpse of the warrior within, the man forged by pain and discipline, tempered by unwavering loyalty. This was the Spartan ideal, a man whose mind was as sharp as his spear, whose spirit was as unyielding as his shield. This quiet time, this solitary communion with his thoughts and his tools, was essential. It was in these moments that Theron truly understood the weight of his shield, not just its physical burden, but the immense, intangible weight of expectation, of duty, of the very soul of Sparta resting upon him. And for a Spartan, this was not a burden to be resented, but a privilege to be embraced. The last vestiges of daylight had faded, leaving the barracks bathed in the soft, flickering glow of oil lamps. The air, cool and quiet now, held a different kind of tension, a settling anticipation. Theron, his shield gleaming from its meticulous cleaning, began the final, sacred ritual of the day, preparing for the inevitable. He meticulously checked his armor, the cut bronze of his cuirass, the leather straps of his greaves that protected his shins, the heavy, layered fabric of his chiton. Each piece was a testament to Spartan craftsmanship designed for protection and mobility. He ran his hand over the horsehair crest of his helmet, a distinctive plume that made a Spartan hoplite instantly recognizable on the battlefield. It was more than just equipment. It was an extension of his body, a second skin, a defiant challenge to any foe. He drew his Ephors, his short, leaf-bladed sword, from its scabbard. The steel, cool and dark, was razor-sharp, honed to perfection. He practiced a few swift, silent thrusts, the blade whispering through the air. The sword was a weapon of last resort, a brutal answer when the phalanx broke, when the spear shattered, when the lines intertwined in a desperate, bloody embrace. But it was also a weapon of resolve, a commitment to fight to the last breath. Beside him, Lycon was similarly engaged, his movements a mirror of Theron's. They worked in comfortable silence, their shared purpose a bond stronger than any spoken word. Eventually, Lycon cleared his throat, a low rumble. The new recruits, their movements today, slow, like oxen in a mire. Theron grunted, a slight curve to his lips. They will learn. Or they will not join us on the next campaign. It was the harsh truth of their world, a truth understood and accepted. There was no room for weakness, for hesitation, only absolute readiness. The Spartan readiness was not a fleeting impulse, it was a constant state of being. Every day was a preparation for war, every drill a rehearsal for the battle that would inevitably come. The Spartan ideal was not empty bravado, but a profound acceptance of their fate, to return with your shield, victorious, or to be carried upon it, dead but honorable. There was no third option, no middle ground. They spoke of the famed hoplite phalanx, the formidable wall of shields and spears that had crushed empires. Each man was a single brick, inseparable from the others, the strength of the whole residing in the unyielding unity of its parts. A single gap, a single moment of faltering, could shatter the entire formation, leading to disaster. It was why their training was so brutal, why their discipline was absolute. Their lives depended on it. As the last checks were made, as the weapons were carefully placed within reach, a profound stillness settled over the barracks. The air seemed to hum with unspoken anticipation, the silent understanding that tomorrow, or the day after, or a year from now, the call would come, and they would answer. Theron lay on his hard cot, the smooth, cold stone beneath him a familiar embrace. He gazed up at the rough wooden beams of the ceiling, his thoughts drifting not to the past, but to the unwavering certainty of the future. The training, the shared meals, the civic duties, the quiet reflections, all led to this. The next battle, the next defense of Sparta. The flickering lamplight cast dancing shadows on the walls, transforming the familiar shapes of his sleeping brothers into silent, formidable figures. For Theron, and for every Spartan, peace was merely the interval between wars. And true rest, perhaps, only came in victory, or in the embrace of a glorious death, carried home on the very shield he had so meticulously prepared. The weight of that shield, both physical and metaphorical, was immense, but it was a weight he carried with unwavering pride. And as sleep claimed him, he knew that with the dawn, the relentless cycle would begin anew, another day in the life of a Spartan warrior forever ready for the shield. Support our channel by liking this video and subscribing so we can continue making great stories for your to listen. Thank you.